Hello, and welcome to Between the Lines. I'm Sian Bessie, and I'm here with Traci Hunter-Abramson and Sarah M. Eden. And those of you who are regular listeners or followers on YouTube might notice that we are missing our co-host, Esther Hatch, today. And Esther is off on an adventure with her family, traveling to places unknown in their brand new RV, which we are excited for her and sad for us.
Yes.
I don't think it'll come as much of a surprise to those of you who have been listening to us for a while to know that we all love traveling. And so while the three of us are at home wishing that we could be with Esther, I thought that today we could spend a little bit of time reminiscing about some of the trips that we have each taken in the past. So the first question that I have for Sarah and Traci is, have you ever taken a trip that you thought was just a vacation, something, maybe even relatively low key, but it unexpectedly sparked an idea for a story?
Yeah. All of us could probably say, all the time.
I was going to say, it's probably kind of a silly question. Yeah.
I can spark that.
Well, that's totally low key. Well done.
At the end, I went to the grocery store and thought, here's a story. No, quite a few years ago, I can't even remember how many. My family went on a trip to Victoria in British Columbia, Canada. I don't even remember what the reason for going was. It literally was just a family, vacation. I suspect it's because my daughter loves the ocean and loves the sea, and you're able to go while you're there, go out on tours with marine bio. There's a marine biologist group that'll do them. So you can go learn more about the ocean and the animals who live there. And they do so in a way that's very, respectful of nature and all. So it was a good opportunity to let her have this experience. And then the more I learned about Victoria, it just seemed really, really interesting. So we went, and it was 100% meant to be just a family trip. And it was, but we went and toured this really grand, amazing home there on Victoria, Craig Darroch Castle. And the moment I walked in, I thought, oh my gosh, there's a story here. Because it was immaculate and interesting, but also a little bit spooky, but kind of unintentionally. And this house just kind of felt alive with history. And so I took so many notes and so many pictures as we're going through this enormous home, and just filed it away. Someday I want to write a book about a home that feels this way and has this kind of, atmosphere to it. That was long time ago. I am currently writing a book using a lot of the stuff that I found there and took pictures of and recorded. So it didn't make it into a book immediately, but it has now. It's probably been at least 10 years, and it's now starting to come up. So yeah, there's story ideas everywhere. File them away and wait for them to be useful.
Well, and this is a perfect example of how your plotting and keeping notes and taking photographs has just come back to bless you. Because if it was that long ago, you think you remember details, but my word, when life
so many
continues,
notes in the moment. Yeah.
Yes,
so that I wouldn't forget.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I had a similar experience. I've actually been to BC, Victoria too, and loved it. But I think I've mentioned this before, but as a family, or part of my family, we did a Mediterranean cruise. And it was the first time I had ever done a cruise. So I wasn't absolutely sure what to expect. But it was such an amazing experience. We were with a European cruise line, and so the ship was filled with people from all over Europe, speaking just about every language you can imagine. In fact, because I grew up in Europe, I'm usually pretty good at knowing where people are from based on how they're speaking. And we were on a little excursion with a group, and there were a couple, and I finally turned to my husband and I said, I cannot figure out what language they're speaking. I know they're European, but I just can't figure out where they're coming from. And so I eventually approached them and I said, I hope that this is not, rude, but can you tell me where you're from? And they said, Malta. And I was like, okay, well, I've never heard Maltese spoken before.
Right.
They were speaking Maltese. And anyway, it was just so fascinating that as these ships, they're not quite as they do have security, but it's not quite like going through an airport. And I remember as we were coming back onto the ship thinking, what could you bring onto a ship that you couldn't bring onto an airplane? And that triggered the idea for the Gem Thief. And it was so fun to write because basically I kind of relived this cruise experience, which I hadn't planned on doing until we went. So that was my experience like that.
That's
Wow.
kind of
And
what
afterwards,
happened.
like yours.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened to me too. When I went, I was actually meeting Sarah and a couple of friends in Helsinki, and I had always wanted to go to the Baltic states, and I was like, you never know what ideas might spark, so let me just see what's there. And my book On the Run literally like follows a lot of the path that I took, but I did, I guess the writer brain was kind of going a little bit because every place I went, like I flew into Vilnius, but then I took the bus to Riga, and then I flew out of Riga, and then I took the ferry to Helsinki. And I will say, getting on the ferry in Helsinki, it's like a cruise ship, by the way. They're huge. But I was thinking the same thing. Okay, how would I get through security? It's like going through the different security areas and just seeing like in Riga, some of the people going through, they were trying to bring through like these huge shampoo bottles because they'd never flown before. And so it's like in the United States, it's not as common to see somebody flying for the very first time ever.
Right.
But in some places that was. So, it's interesting where you can use those little tidbits. So, but yeah. So I didn't plan on it being literally creating a book, but it did.
But it happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that we've all taken trips because of a story, where you go somewhere to research an event or a person or to see something with your own eyes. So do you have a favorite experience that's like that, where you went with a purpose?
They're all good experiences. So it's hard to, honestly, probably one of my favorites was when we were all together in Europe, but
Yes.
but my most recent was actually when I went to Asia. I need to write a book set there, and I'd been meaning to do it for a while. And I'm like, okay, I can't keep putting this book off any longer. It's time to write it. So that was fun. I was able to base out of Singapore and then do Thailand and Indonesia and Malaysia. And then I also stopped in Turkey. And just by chance, the book I'm working on right now has scenes that will be set in Turkey. So I'm like, oh, perfect. Istanbul. Yes, that's where this is going to happen. But yeah, that was a great one.
Yeah, that's great.
I feel like I could answer this with so many different trips.
Yeah.
I'm actually in the moment going to change which one I was going to answer with. You're welcome. I was just thinking on our trip when we went to the UK and to France, I knew I had 4 different books I needed to do research for while we were in France because I've planned them out. I know the plot lines. I know where they take place.
Oh,
so I could hit different places and take all of the notes that I needed. And 2 different locations that I did research at, I have used in writing 2 different books already in this last like 4 or 5 months. And I have research for others that's going to come up. That trip also, when we were in London, I got to go to the actual locations where I set my Dread Penny Society series because I specifically decided I was setting it in real life Victorian London. I studied maps from the 1860s in London that were mapped according to demographics of the area, like the areas that were very poor, the areas that were very rich, the areas that had a lot of crime, so that I made sure the neighborhoods all felt like they should and each street felt like it was supposed to. So while we were there, I got to go to the actual street and stand outside of the actual door of the actual building where I set the fictional Dread Penny Society headquarters. And that was such a surreal moment because it was all made up in my brain, but was set in such an actual location that I intentionally made as real to life as it could, that I got to actually be somewhere that I had invented in real life. It was just about the coolest thing. So that was definitely a highlight, probably one of my absolute favorite I'm traveling because of a story moments.
And I'm just going to add something to Sarah's. When she said she stood outside the house, that's not exactly true. It was more like she was dancing and spinning. And
I tried to make myself sound dignified.
Our driver could not figure out why we were going to this one spot. And then he was like, why is she so excited about it?
It was such a happy moment for everyone because
the cab driver was like, this street? Why are you so excited about this one? It's like, you don't understand.
Yeah, she was giddy and it just made us all so happy. So.
That was such a great memory.
Yeah. And I think I agree, Sarah. I think sometimes the experiences that we have that really connect emotionally to us are the ones that are the most magical. And so I would say that one of the experiences that I had that was that way was when I went down the Big Pit in Wales. I was writing a book based on the miners from South Wales, and my ancestry, I have miners in my ancestry, and it was the first time that I had ever gone down into a coal mine. And the Big Pit is set up like a living museum. So you go into the mine and it's just the way it was in the 1800s, early 1900s. And it was so eye-opening, and it was emotional because you think, wow, these people in the winter there, they're far enough north that the sun sets early and rises late. So they literally got up in the dark, went into the mine, got out of the mine in the dark. They didn't see sunlight for weeks and weeks and weeks. And just learning the little things that you'd never know otherwise, like coal is very often in the same area as iron ore. And Wales, it rains a lot, and the water has to go somewhere. So it goes through the ground and into these big tunnels that they've built that rolls, just drips down the walls, and it comes down orange because of the iron ore that is in the ground. So you have these orange rivers of water going through. And that's the kind of thing I never would have known if I hadn't gone down into the tunnel. And so that's kind of when the magic happens, is when you're able to experience it like that.
Right.
Okay, so the big question then really is, where would you like to go next? And is it because of a specific story or just because it's a place you've always wanted to go?
So this is such a wide open question because
I know.
I feel like any place that I can go is a good place. Like I do love to go foreign, and Europe is probably one of my favorite places. There's several countries I'd still love to go there, go visit. But one of the places, like I said, I just got back from Istanbul not long ago, and I would love to go back there, especially if I could convince my husband to come with me and go see more of Turkey. I just think there's so much history there and it's one of the regions that is a little bit safer. One of the countries that's a little safer in that region, where I might be able to get a little more insight to, like I said, just some of the history. I know I don't write historical, but you need the history in order to create the contemporary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's always so fun to see like the cistern and some of the places there are just amazing. And one of the things that I love is just, you get a local tour guide that can really bring the stories to life. So I think probably that would be one of my top ones, but Europe will probably be my next stop because, it's
because it's Europe.
It's Europe. And keep in mind, for those of you who think I'm just a jet setter, it is actually often cheaper for me to fly to Europe than it is to fly to the West Coast of the United States. So
yeah,
I'm just putting it out there that it's not as glamorous as it sounds. It's just because of where I live. It's more economical.
Yeah, that definitely helps. Well, I have had on my bucket list for a long time that I want to go down the Norwegian fjords. And I actually lived in Norway for a short time when I was young because my father was doing research in Oslo. And it's somewhere that I've always wanted to go back to. So that, and having written a couple of books with the feature Vikings, I feel like that might be my next stop.
Oh man. Take lots of pictures.
Yeah.
Or bring a Sarah-sized suitcase.
Ooh.
I'll come with you.
Oh, that would be great. I'd love that.
Man, yeah, that sounds great. I recently, as in the last, I don't know, month or so, had a fantastic idea for a story that I'm really excited about. I wouldn't be able to write it for a little while because of, my writing schedule, but it's set in Australia, which I haven't written anything set there before, but it has to take place there just because of what the story is. I've been to Melbourne in Australia and absolutely loved it, but this story doesn't work in that part of Australia. So I think that is, if not next on my list of places to travel to, it's high on the list because I need to go do a lot of research because it's not a place I've been to before and it's not a place I'm as familiar with. Just like Traci was saying, just to kind of get the feel of the place and the history that came before the part that you're writing. It's so helpful to go if you can. I realize it's not always possible for people and writers to do that, but if you can, man, what a difference it makes. So that is the list of places I need to get to. I need to get back to Australia, but a different area of it than I was in before. And I already have a lot of people who've said, take me with you. I'll be a tour guide.
We'll volunteer. Yeah. We'll volunteer to go get lost with you.
Exactly. We'll just fill up an airplane and randomly arrive in Australia. It'll be fantastic. But I'm very high on my list and I'm excited. I loved the part of Australia I've already seen. I can't wait to learn more about it. It's such an enormous place that every area is going to be different. So yeah,
fun. Yeah.
I'm very excited.
No, that sounds great. And I should probably interject here and tell our listeners that the fact that the three of us are willing and eager to go on another trip together really says something, because when we plan these trips, we do a lot of planning, but 9 times out of 10, something goes wrong.
Yes.
So I want you to be thinking about a time when you've made a trip that something has gone either badly or hilariously wrong. And I will share an experience that happened when I was traveling with Sarah. And this was our return from our UK France trip. Traci had already gone home because we landed on the East Coast. And Sarah and I were supposed to fly from Dulles into Salt Lake. Our flight was really early in the morning, which was a bad idea to begin with. And so we left the hotel before they'd even put out breakfast. We were the first shuttle out. The shuttle driver obviously was not happy about being the shuttle driver that early because he did not want to help. So I hauled all of our luggage into the shuttle, including Sarah's wheelchair. And we got to the airport and I had Sarah's bag and we were divided. We were separated going through security. And that was the last I saw of Sarah for quite some time. I had her bag, she had her wheelchair. We were put on different trains. I ended up in a platform where the announcer kept saying, this is the final train to this terminal. And Sarah wasn't there. And Sarah was on a completely wrong train. Her wheelchair got stuck in the door. All of the people on the train were trying to help her get off. And then we were late. And so we just barely made it onto the flight. And then we had that 5-6 hour flight and we had no breakfast, no lunch. We had
so jet lagged.
I think we had one muffin that was squashed that had been in our bag for 24 hours.
Since Paris, yeah.
And Traci had given us some digestive biscuits and that was the extent of our breakfast. Anyway, I remember getting onto that airplane and we both just collapsed in a fit of giggles because we were so grateful that we had reconnected and we were on the right flight.
Yes.
But we knew that if we wrote it, no one would believe it actually happened. It was so terrible.
Exactly. It was the most ridiculous thing. And I think we texted Traci from the plane, basically saying, we've got on the plane and are currently having our breakfast of half a squished muffin and a digestive
Yes.
biscuit.
That is
We'll
exactly
tell you
what I
the story
received.
when we land.
And I think we may have added, you should never let us travel alone again.
Yes, and I was feeling a little guilty because, first of all, they're flying out of one of my normal airports, because I say one of because there's 4 I can fly in and out of. But I never thought about the fact that the train always announces that thing about like, this is the final stop or whatever, and that the train is now out of service, because it does it for every single stop. It's just telling everyone to get off so it can go back and start at the beginning. But I guess if you haven't had any sleep,
No,
and
no,
you're
that's right.
starving,
And you're starving, and you're completely convinced that the person you're supposed to be traveling with has now gone back to Paris because she got on the wrong train.
I'm never
I
letting you
was
guys travel alone
the
again.
focus of a rescue effort because the wheels of my wheelchair were stuck in the door and all the passengers are trying to pull it onto the train. I was like, what is even happening right now?
And every time I go through Dulles Airport, I'm like, I think of that story every single time, because I always have to take that train.
I only wish we had had it on video. It would have gone viral.
It would have. It would have. Comedy of errors. Man.
Yeah.
The only thing even remotely close to that I have from my travels, my family and I, the very first time we went to Ireland, we were going to be hitting a lot of things in the countryside. So we actually rented a rental car to drive to the different places we were going. And our very, very first day, again, jet lag, exhaustion from these long flights, never been in Ireland, driving on the opposite side of the road we expect, with the steering wheel on the other side in a manual transmission car. So like we were set up for things to go very, very long. That afternoon, we're following the online map app, instructions to get to the town of Kilkenny. That was our first stop. And it drove us literally right into a farmer's field, which was incredibly muddy because this was Ireland. The car got stuck and I had to go find the owner of this field to pull us out with his tractor. And that was when I became ever more acquainted with the sharp wit of the Irish, because we were mocked to oblivion, but he did rescue us, and that story has made it into a book. So it was ridiculous, but I have put it to good use.
There you go.
Yeah. I don't know that I've had anything like I've had times where people try to be like deceptive and, tracking people. But, it's like, from my background, I don't really worry so much about a lot of those things because you just kind of instinctively adjust. But one humorous, everyone I think has one of those days in traveling where it's like, you just miss everything, just everything isn't quite there. So I had one of those days where I was flying across the country from DC to Salt Lake City. And it was one of those where like my first flight was running a bit late, and then I didn't have enough time to grab a bite to eat on my layover. So then I had to rush to my flight. And of course, with the way the time zones changed, I'm like, it had been a while since I'd eaten. It's like, I'm kind of hungry. And so I come out of the airport, and I'm going to take the tracks, so the local light rail, to the front runner train to go down actually to Sarah's house. And I walk out of the out of the airport, and I see the train, and I start running, and it pulls away. And so then I'm like, oh, well, it's like 10, 15 minutes I have to wait. It's like, well, whatever. And so I get on the tracks, and I, get to my station to make the transfer. And I'm going down the escalator, and I see the train as it's pulling away. I was like, no, this is like, it's gotta be 8 o'clock at night, 7 or 8 o'clock at night at least. And I haven't eaten since maybe like one of their situations, like maybe a half a muffin at breakfast or something.
Yes.
And so I was like, what so I pull out my phone. I was like, what is there nearby? And so the only place I can find is this Crown Burger. And I was like, okay, I'm not a big burger person, but okay, I'll do that. And I go in and just my sense of humor kind of sparks because I'd gotten some like sweet potato fries or something, and I go to get some ketchup, and there's in Utah, for anyone who's from Utah, and I think Idaho has this too, you see your condiments, and it's like there was like mayonnaise and mustard and ketchup, and then this big sign that says fry sauce. And everything had been wiped clean on the counter, and there's one drop of fry sauce on. I'm like, well, I know I'm in Utah. At least if nothing else, I may be in the wrong spot, but I'm in Utah. And I had posted just that funny little whim, and all of a sudden, it's like that thing went, in my version, viral. I was like 50,000 hits on that thing. So this is why if anyone ever sees me and Sarah and Sean joking about fry sauce and that I'm not that big of a fan, which sorry, folks, I mean, I can tolerate it, but it's just not my thing. But it was just one of those funny moments of like things not quite going right, but you just, all right, you know what? I'm just going to laugh about it all.
You roll with it.
It just is,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think that since we've talked about the things that go wrong, we'll finish this up by me asking you if you've ever had something unexpected, excuse me, but wonderful happen on one of your trips.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, which is probably one reason
Mhm.
why we all like to keep traveling, especially
Mhm.
when we're looking into books, because things, magical things can happen while you're out doing it. One that I think of, this was another trip I actually took with Traci and a couple of our friends. We were in Dublin. I got to take them to Dublin, which love that place. And we got to go into a museum I'd always wanted to go into, but hadn't had time to yet. It's called the Georgian House. It's just off Marion Square. It's an old Georgian era home that's been restored into a museum. So basically what it would have looked like in the late early 1800s. So we got to go tour this, and there was going to be a big school group coming through right about the same time we were. So they kind of warned us. They were like, these guys will be in and out quick. They have to be here. It's a school trip. So we went through kind of quick up to the top level and then waited it out until all of these students left, and then came back down more slowly. And we got to the level where the drawing room was. And that's when I was like, guys, it's going to take a minute, because I wanted to look at everything and take all the pictures I could and take notes. But one of the museum docents was in there, and he had worked at this museum. I don't remember, Traci, how long it was, but it was
like 25, 30 years or
ages.
something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And could see that all of us were really intrigued. I was the only person who wrote in the Georgian era, but when you travel with other writers who also are very curious, you absorb things. It's just, you find it interesting to learn things. He could tell we were interested and excited, and walked over and basically said, what do you want to know? And for like an hour, he regaled us not just with the history of this house, but of Dublin itself. I mean, we learned so many things. And from that conversation, he told me about someone in history I hadn't heard of. I went and looked her up, and I am working on a story about this woman's life because she was incredible. So it was kind of a moment that was meant to be. He was excited to talk to us. We were excited to hear from him. And when you're flexible enough with your plans that you're willing to say, we had planned to leave already, but we have this hour opportunity to learn some incredible things. When you have that flexibility, magical things can happen.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think sometimes just serendipity, we just have to grasp it. On our trip to Paris, one of the things that it was total luck, serendipity. We had signed up to do a croissant making class, and we got there, and it was supposed to be a large class, but none of the other people who had signed up came. So here Traci, Sarah, and I have the entire kitchen and the instructor to ourselves to make croissants in Paris. It was just so much fun, and something we never could have anticipated before.
It was fabulous.
And for me, there's just so many good. And I have to say, our trip together has so many of those nuggets, because like I'd never I really hadn't ever been to a big production of a musical before, and we did 2 on the West End, so that was so much fun. And I'm doing that with Sarah and Sean, and then also we'd done London first, but going to Wales with Sean was such a magical moment, just being able to just appreciate like where she's from and seeing, we got to see the house that she spent a good portion of her growing up years and things like that.
Why she's as weird as she is.
We're still working on that, Sean.
Why we love her as much as we do. And well, the fun part was like she's always telling us like, I don't really have I have this mismatched accent because she's not quite a Welsh accent, she's got an American accent. And it's like when we got there, we're like, oh yeah, there's definitely
I've lost most of it. Yeah.
But we also she gained a lot more of it back the longer we were there. So that was
I feel
probably
like pretty quickly she started sounding a lot more Welsh. To the point that I couldn't pick her out in the grocery store.
I know that was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
So
that was a fun trip. Well, thanks for all your reminiscing, and we all still feel a little envious of Esther, but as we bring this episode to a close, we'd like to ask you, where would you like to go? Is there somewhere or some place that's been on your bucket list for a long time? Leave us a message on our social media pages or on YouTube telling us where you'd most like to travel, and then join us again on our next episode of Between the Lines.